August 24th, 2021 was the best day of my life. I had just started at a branding agency. I was the executive vice president of the company. And just a month in, we had a fun day. Boat day. We got on a large boat out on the Detroit River, right in between Michigan and Canada. We drove all the way out to a sandbar. We had all the drinks, all the food, all the fun. The whole agency was on the boat, and we had a blast. Some young people might say it was litty. Guys, we docked that boat. We jumped out in the water. It was shallow, and we were throwing beers. We were throwing drinks. We were throwing footballs. We were partying and having a great time. But there was one thing about that boat that wasn't okay. You see, no one on that boat knew that I was an alcoholic. For about 15 to 20 years of my life at that point, I had struggled and struggled and struggled with this thing called alcohol. You see, as a former football player, no man like me wanted to admit that I was powerless against the substance. You know, I was all of 6'2", 6'3", 220 pounds, plus about 30. And I did not want to admit that I couldn't defeat this thing called alcohol. So as I was drinking and drinking, knowing I should not have been participating, I was getting more and more and more inebriated. After the boat trip was over, we got back to our cars, and I had a long hour-and-a-half drive all the way home. About 45 minutes into that drive, I blacked out. Somehow, I made it to my home city. About 2 minutes away from home, I ended up parking in a parking lot. I don't remember any of this because I was blacked out. Next thing you know, I hear a knock on my window. The car was still on, and I was asleep. The police pulled me out. They gave me a sobriety test. Obviously, I completely failed. They grudgingly put handcuffs on me and put me in the back of one of their cars. They take me to the police station and slam the doors until I sobered up. The worst part about that night was that the next day was the first day of school. It was my son's first day of high school. It was my baby boy's first day of kindergarten. And the guilt and the shame and the disgrace that I had in my heart that night while sitting in jail, letting my family down, was almost insurmountable. And I'm pretty sure some of you guys are like, how in the world is this your best day ever? Well, the reason is because in that jail cell, I had what is called an awakening. I had an awakening. I came to myself, and I finally admitted that I was powerless, and that I realized that I no longer had to, not that I no longer wanted to, but I no longer had to drink anymore. The next day, I took a walk to shame home. My wife sitting there at the table, and the grief and the sadness that was on her face, I will never forget. And I made a promise to her and to my family that I would never, ever put them in that situation ever again. And by the grace of God, today, I am 2.5 years sober. You guys, I travel the world now speaking on a concept called failing forward, because I understand that our failures are not our end. Your failures do not dictate your destiny, but they can fuel your future. So now what I want to do is make sure that everyone, anyone that was in the same position that I was in once, they realize that they can make a better choice. They can make a different choice. They don't have to drink. They can change their life. They can live their life, because now I get to live. I'm no longer living in the darkness. I've crawled my way over the last 2.5 years back to the daylight. But there was a specific story that I heard that changed my life. Back in 1957, in Bangkok, Thailand, there were these monks that were relocating a monastery. And inside this monastery stood a 9-foot, 8-inch concrete Buddha. And as they were relocating the monastery, a small piece of concrete falls off the Buddha. And one of the monks recognized that there was light coming from the Buddha. And he goes away and chisels away a little bit of the concrete, and he notices more light is coming from the Buddha. He tells the rest of the monks there's something underneath this concrete. They all chisel away all of the concrete, and they discover a 9-foot, 8-inch, 5.5-ton solid gold Buddha worth $250 million. This is a true story. Over 3 million people go to Bangkok every year to visit this precious Buddha. Well, the story goes 200 years prior, in the early 1700s, the monks then were worshiping the golden Buddha. And they heard that the Burmese army was coming in to invade Bangkok, Thailand. And they said there's no way they can discover this valuable Buddha. So they covered it with mud and clay. And as soon as the Burmese army comes in, they kill off half the land. They discover the concrete Buddha, and they decide there's no value in it. And after about 100 years, anyone that once lived there and remembered the golden Buddha had either died off or forgotten until it was rediscovered that day in 1957. Guys, the moral of this story is that when we were little, we were precious, we had value, and we all had light. But something happened along the way. Whether it was our parents that imposed their fears on us. Hey, don't date that guy, he's going to hurt you. Don't date that girl, she's no good for you. Our teachers would tell us, hey, you need to go to this school for that. You need to get this degree, go to that major. Our friends, our boyfriends, our girlfriends, they broke our hearts. They lied to us. So we put up these things called walls. And we go through half of our life carrying baggage and walking around as a shell of a person. And we look in the mirror sometime midlife and we say, you know, I don't even recognize who I am anymore. And then something happens. Whether it's a divorce, a health scare, a car accident. You might even get fired from your job. And a little bit of that clay, a little bit of that shell of a person you've been carrying around falls off. And somebody comes to you and they say, you know what? There's something different about you. There's something special about you. There's something more you should be doing with your life. You should leave that job. You should leave that relationship. He's no good for you. You should start that book. You should start that business. There's something more you should be doing with your life. And you say, you know what? You're right. I'm going to live my life unapologetically, happily, and I don't care what anybody thinks about it. Some people call this a midlife crisis. What is actually happening is you are rediscovering that light that God buried deep inside of you when you were born, that the world tried to take away. Well, I am here today to help you crawl from darkness to daylight. And if you're sitting in this audience today and you know exactly what I'm saying, today is your day. Today is your awakening. Can we all stand? Guys, it was a golden Buddha story that I heard 2.5 years ago that not only changed my life, but it saved my life. And I hope that tonight when you lay your head on the pillow, you think about the golden Buddha story. You think about where you are in your life. You think about if you're carrying the shell, if you're carrying a baggage, and if you need to crawl back into the light. I want you to repeat after me. I will discover the light inside me. I will, I can, I must. Thank you so much. My name is Jacob Brown. God bless.